You might think that the princess kissed the frog. That would mean that all ugly can be turned into a beautiful prince by softness alone. In the real story, the princess was disgusted by the frog, and she threw it at the wall. The frog then turned back into a prince, who was cursed to only be set free after he saw that the ugly would be hated for that exact virtue. The prince then learned that his loyalty should not be with people like the princess, but with people like his servant who came to pick him up. The servant that was so happy for the prince's return that his own heart started working properly again after all this time of having lost his prince. Yes, there is beauty in the ugly, and yes, the ugly affront will be enough to warrant hateful reactions too. But the frog should be the one to know where its beauty lies. And like the frog from the fairy tale, I would say that all frogs are born in murky waters. From that dirt, the tadpoles feed and turn into frogs. They emerge onto land as smooth, clean frogs. Like this, frogs actually turn the murky into the clear and smooth. This is why a frog is beautiful. They have turned something even uglier into something beautiful. This is the connection frogs have with nature. In this video I shall take you with me on my research into frogs and magic. We shall see the Gitrog monsters and the mechanics that most frogs have. We also go through options for frog planeswalkers. On Innistrad there is a lot of murkiness and therefore a big need for frogs. Of the 4 provinces, Nephalia is the worst. The beach-laden province where the sun never shines, because it's misty. I've read in my Planeswalker's guide that humans, vampires and geists mostly come here. There are many cults here because this place is so secluded, and the alchemists that are too crazy for the horror plane of Innistrad itself live here too. The natives of this place are said to build many ships because they try to cross the seas. No one returns, but because a vampire cultist keeps them helping them build boats, they keep becoming motivated to build more boats, even though it's a cult of a deep sea demon that likes to sink boats. No one ever thinks about this part. We are on the horror plane of Innistrad. We zoomed in to the most murky, eerie province, but we can do worse, because the people of Nephalia need to get wood for their boats. Because of this, they have stripped all the lands of trees and have therefore made the ground sink into a swampy region called Selhof. The town that is still up for only its own vestings of its own houses. The town on the edge of the horror world. Here are spirits and a huge, flying, electric conducting zombie that laughs all day and night. Now one last zoom in to the swamps next to Selhof called Morkrot. Here no one really enters other than famous ghoul callers, because for them there are huge zombie giants to find here that have been bloated by geist energies. Otherwise the swamp is filled with unclaimed bodies and therefore a lot of banshees that try to bite your head off. Now there are humans here. These are the natives, and lately they have been split up in 2 groups. This is one thing that Wizards does explain. We know that Wizards always gives us at least 5 sentences of lore about legendaries. This time we learn that Grolnok has a cult or spawn behind them, and that they rival with the slug god Toxrill and their temple. The cultists of Grolnok did a ritual and Grolnok came to being. That's it for official lore for now, and I don't think that we will be getting any more. We can also see the deforested Nephalia in the background of Grolnok. We see them posing in a relaxed stance as they are devouring a human in their see-through belly. Their eyes are glowing purple as if to hypnotize us, as frogs on Innistrad often do. Simon Dominic made this art, and I urge you to look his art up for yourself, because scrolling through it is way more fun. and I don't want to expose you to too much at the same time. You can see that he makes more grotesque things seem more cute. But this cuteness is just a distraction for him to get us used to the ugly. Today I intend to do the same. A short summary for Simon's art. Mesmerizingly sloppy floppy. That is a quote by myself. In fact, he made the slug thing too, but also the beautiful frog that we see before us now. We shall now focus on frogs more to forget about slugs. One last unforgettable aspect is the card of Grolnok himself. He is a 5 mana Simic 3/3 that lets you mill 3 cards whenever a frog from your side attacks. Whenever, so not for all frogs. You exile permanents from these mills with croaks on them. All croaked cards can be played or cast. This is to show us that Grolnok not only eats, he recycles in this barren land. We see this from the blue X in the forefront of the art too. Frogs often do Spore Effects or Fog Effects, which is just frog without an R. We see this most famously in Spore Frog, which is just a 1 mana 1/1. But this frog can be sacrificed to prevent all combat damage. This is now a fog effect. We see this effect because frogs can actually exude massive smells, and we often are then unable to move after smelling such a thing. The flavor of this frog says, a progenitor of tadpoles and allergies in equal measure. So, a pretty progenitive frog. Another thing we see a lot is Froggification. This is the effect where you can turn a creature into a frog. This is of course a joke often in the spells, but for us being a frog is a plus side. So if we see for example Craig J. Spearing, who is the only person to have 2 arts of frogs, make a joke out of frogs, then we should say, stop this, we need to honor these beings. Just like we kind of see in Frogify from Chris Seaman, which is honestly just another joke on the fairy tale of the frog and the princess. We also see frogs, especially the bigger frogs, eat a lot, especially from a graveyard, or sometimes, in case of the Simic frogs, they can eat +1 counters too. There are humanoid frogs too, which is especially interesting because then we have to think how a civilization of frogs would look like. We see this in the Simic, where they are more a part of the Combine and they have their own region in Dorador on the plane of Strixhaven. In Dorador, the frogs have their own cities, where they probably protect their eggs and live in ponds and on lilies. But we have not yet seen the city, so we have no way to know, which is such a shame. Some frogs gain temporary flying skills too, which is weird to say because they are probably just jumping, but in Magic this is called flying too, so they can do that. And just recently we have seen some frogs that have been copied from other persons as well, which seems like a really strange horror trope, if you ask me, that you would be replaced by a frog that looks otherwise just like you. That would be really strange to see that my village had been taken over and now we are all frogs. The masks of reflections of Lichara have frogs on them as well, and the card also works very well with Grolnok. Use Kindred Summons for this as well if you will. You can make multiple frogs whenever you use frogs. I guess in that sense Aaron Miller has made 2 frog arts too. Now that I think about it, Aaron Miller does honor frogs. Aaron Miller actually feels like the other perfect artist for frogs. His art feels ugly and beautiful at the same time. Splurging colors together is art, but it is a masterpiece when you can make me feel chaotic from your art alone, and then make it beautiful too. The art is ugly because of the subject more, because of the eye that feels weird, and because this merfolk is just a bit too close for my taste. It is beautiful because of the chaotic composition, the colors that feels toxic, but at the same time joyous as if to say that being confused can be fun too. This feels like a perfect description of a frog now that I reread it, and I say we give more frog art to Aaron Miller too. Now let us look at a bit of frog magic history. We have Turk here, a Dominarian frog turned increasingly human by his master Laquadus on Dominaria. This frog could defeat small dragons in battle and could even use magic. He also ate a lot of most frogs in magic, which often got our man Turk into trouble. Like when he ate a dragon's servant. Turk could spy on people because he could turn invisible. And you can see how a frog can be a dangerous enemy. They can climb, go into camouflage mode, they can learn magic, they can eat anything and therefore survive anywhere. And even though a secret agent, Turk is now gone, his spawn still roam on Dominaria. Dominaria has more massive frogs. Yargle is a massive frog, a 9-3 at least, who used to be a frog but transformed, as frogs do, into a massive being as he ate something he should not have, as frogs also do. Yargle has protection against magic, at least in the story, probably because he is slippery like the fog frogs. Yargle stinks so much that people are partly stunned. His voice can make people that come too close deaf. Yes, this frog also screams. Right now this frog was last seen in a wrestling match with Muldrotha, the slime monster, much like the battle between Grolnok and the slime monster Toxru. Now I was wondering, do we have a frog planeswalker? Well, Cosmina transforms people often into frogs, but I would not say that Cosmina has a frog planeswalker because she is more aligned with owls. And she kind of disrespected frogs when she turned an Eternal into one and said, "Hop away now, little Eternal, and go eat some flies." So we have to still wait on a true frog-aligned planeswalker, and I personally hope it comes from the Frog City on Strixhaven to take revenge on Cosmina, who was also on Strixhaven. Back on Innistrad we have one last frog. This one is in one way like Grolnok, in that he still has an arm hanging out of his mouth. This one also lives in Nevalia, but he lives more on the northern side of it, instead of east where the true swamps are. Still, the Gitrog monster was for long times only a story, as he could control people who stared at him for too long, disabling them from telling a story. There could be a theory here that Grolnok is actually the Gitrog monster. Also a little sad, but the last we saw from our boy is in the new card, Gitrog Horror of Sava, in which we see them transformed by Emrakul, and although most beings have turned back when Emrakul was imprisoned, we do not know what happened to the monster of Gitrog, other than that they misunderstood the monster's birthplace for its name. Also note that the Gitrog monster is black aligned next to the green color of frogs, from the Abyssion probably, and that our Grolnok, for example, has blue as he has been created by humans and nature in conjunction. It's also different as Grolnok was created this way and Gitrog took his opportunity, like we see in Visions of Dominance. We know how Gitrog started as a frog, but his purely natural instinct was to learn how to get to the top of the food chain. Or was it natural? Because it might also have been Emrakul that was starting to take hold of our froggy friend. Still, we see that as a minion of Emrakul, Gitrog is just a strong monster. Before that, the Gitrog could hypnotize people to bring him food, which is much more interesting. So I forgot to add hypnotizing to the list of frog powers. Yeah, the story of the Gitrog monsters is one of the more deranged ones, so I can't really quote it. A true feeling of Emrakul horror, if you will. Now back to our boy, because we want some more relaxation through godliness before we finish today. Grolnok seems to be able to hypnotize too, as we see from his milling ability, but he mills your own lands more than your mind, or so it seems. Then when you sacrifice permanents, he does not really devour. He protects things in his belly, only to release them later. In this way, Grolnok is a true purifier of nature, as most frogs do, like I said in the introduction. Grolnok eats from the worst place on Innistrad, the worst plane, and then purifies whatever he eats to spew it out better than it was before. Grolnok works together with other frogs, and in this manner, Grolnok will be a great leader of frogs in leading the world of Innistrad back to its former forested glory, taking the lands back from the humans. In this way, I think it is safe to follow Grolnok the Omnivore in his pilgrimage. Thank you for watching and subscribing in the name of Grolnok the Omnivore.